Welcome to Streaming Into the Void, where we discuss the streaming news for the week ending June 28th, 2026. I'm Kim Hollis, digital marketing expert, who is ready for a nice, calm season of the bear. Oh, dang it. It's the simple dreams, you know? With me is Tim Bridey, content creator and gamer, and interim manager of the Mets. Congrats.
Well, somebody's got to do it.
Everybody gets a chance.
Is 6 errors good?
Also, David Mumpower, author of Disney Demystified and streaming media analyst, who's definitely not attending a wedding at Madison Square Garden next week. Wink.
Can you get me tickets, David?
I can definitely get you tickets to the thing that I totally know what this references, yes.
And the podcast is produced and edited by Raul Buriel, who inexplicably was traded to Milwaukee this week. Good Lord, I'm so sorry.
Hey, at least I get to hang out with Giannis Antetokounmpo, right?
No.
What?
No, but you can hang out with... Never mind. This week, slowly but surely, Paramount Skydance is inching forward in their acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery. The merger appears to have cleared approval from both EU and Chinese regulators.
Why are random countries in such a hurry to vote for the death of Hollywood? Can someone explain that to me?
Well, that's it, folks. The EU and China, it's a done deal now, right?
Technically, the EU is different than what we've been talking about in England right now. They are separate entities, so England could still make a stink here and have actually threatened that they are, but it's certainly looking like this is going to get shoved through even though nobody wants it. So here we are.
And there's still always the threat of the lawsuit from the state attorneys general, but that seems to be a lot more at this point virtue signaling than anything else, as they've been threatening this lawsuit forever. There was even a big headline a couple of weeks ago that the lawsuit was imminent, and that hasn't happened yet. Look, I'm not saying this deal is definitely going to happen, although if you were a betting person, you'd probably want to start putting money down on who you think the next company to buy Warner Brothers is going to be.
Yeah, Raul keeps making that joke, and there is some truth to it because we have seen previous instances where corporations took over and there was just too much debt, and so we were just waiting for the next thing. In fact, we saw that with Warner Brothers Discovery just a few years ago. So we don't mean to be cynical about this. We have been saying that we thought the deal would probably go through, but we weren't 100% sure. Well, with these latest revelations, we're getting pretty close to 100%. I think I'm speaking for all of us here. Speak up if you disagree. It just seems like, for whatever reason, this is getting jammed through, which means all of the people loaning the money have powerful allies in federal governments across the world.
Meanwhile, Sony's trying to shore up its media business as they back away from game development, but make an investment in outside-the-home entertainment.
Yeah, so there's been a weird thing happening in gaming in the last 12 months or so. If you've been paying any attention, we've previously discussed that Microsoft was in an absolute panic, and they made just mistake after mistake. At one point, they raised the price of Game Pass Ultimate to $29.99 a month. They've since brought it back down to, I want to say, $22.99 a month. It's $23. Can't remember if it's $22.99 or $23.99. The point is, they overreached. They admitted it quickly. They immediately dropped their prices because they had just infuriated too many fans. Sony has basically been doing the same thing this year in some really odd ways. For starters, I play a game called MLB The Show, and MLB The Show 26 has had one of those heel turns that you generally only see in pro wrestling, where they just stopped caring about players entirely and all they wanted to do was empty your bank account. It is now a pay-to-play game in every sense of the word, whereas before this, the game had the reputation of being very gamer-friendly, unlike EA. Well, by the time you hear this podcast, EA may have completed its transaction to sell itself to Saudi Arabia's PIF, the Public Investment Fund, and we're just waiting for that to complete. It was supposed to be done by the end of this fiscal quarter, which is June 30th. We're witnessing all of these changes in gaming, and Sony has just done something absolutely wild with the Destiny community. If you don't know the history of it, Bungie is the studio that created the Halo games for Microsoft. At one point, Bungie got tired of working with Microsoft, so they wanted to go off on their own. So Microsoft took some of the developers and started 343 Studios, and then Bungie became its own thing and created a game called Destiny. Destiny 2, by all accounts, has been one of the biggest hits of its type ever, but it has struggled in the 2020s as Bungie has basically used Destiny as a slush fund to go ahead and do some other things and basically get a lot of people at the top of the corporate food chain very, very wealthy. Well, while that's been happening, Bungie has kept hiring and hiring to maintain Destiny, which is a very expensive game to operate. And at some point, somebody at Bungie said, you know what, screw this. We're going to push down this game that we had done once before Halo. It was called Marathon. They have redone Marathon, and Sony got wind of this and said, oh, let's put all our eggs into the basket of Marathon. And Bungie's like, well, that's not really what we're trying to do here. Only Marathon, says Sony. So we've reached this point where if Marathon failed, Bungie was in trouble. And guess what? Marathon failed. So the writing was on the wall that Sony, who had purchased Bungie about 3 years ago, wasn't happy with anything happening at the studio. So they let out word that Destiny 2 was about to receive its final update a couple of weeks ago. And when that happened, frankly, the entire gaming community revolted in a way we've never seen. And suddenly, a game that had fewer than 10,000 daily players on Steam had 100,000 players. And my understanding is 500,000 people are now playing Destiny 2 each and every day right now after the game was left for dead by Sony. And how did Sony react to this? Did they go ahead and say, well, let's go ahead and do Destiny 3 since you clearly want it? No. They laid off more than 50% of the staff this week, and Sony has let everybody know that they are thinning the ranks everywhere. Meanwhile, back at Microsoft, rumors abound that several different studios owned by Microsoft are either going to be collapsed or they're going to be spun off to their own things and run independently. Gaming is at a crossroads right now because what happened was during the pandemic of 2020 and 2021, everyone was in their homes and playing games. And so companies started making projections based on growth from there rather than this is a once in a century type of scenario. And so everyone overreached, everyone got into financial trouble, and now we're seeing tens of thousands of layoffs across the industry on a fairly consistent basis, an alarming basis. And Sony, right after laying off most of the staff of Bungie, one of the most revered video game developers and publishers ever, turned around and committed $100 million to Cosm. Raul, what in the world is going on?
It's exactly as you described, David. The land rush that happened for game developers a few years back seems to have petered out. We saw a lot of money going to game developers a few years back. There was a bidding war for Activision Blizzard that ultimately Microsoft won. They bought one of the largest video game developers of all time. And then as a consolation prize, that's where the Saudi investment fund came in and bought themselves Electronic Arts. I wonder if maybe they're regretting that purchase. We'd also mentioned throughout the many years of the podcast now the company called Embracer, a Scandinavian video game developer that started snapping up a number of independent video game developers and associated intellectual property that much more recently has come to realize that they are struggling and they've had to make some pretty big moves to keep the company afloat. In fact, Embracer is splitting up into two separate companies. The video game development branch will remain Embracer, and then they're going to spin off a lot of their intellectual property into something called Fellowship Entertainment, which may sound like a pretty strange name until you realize this is the company that owns the rights to The Lord of the Rings. Embracer is spinning off their IP so they can then license it to other companies. As new Lord of the Rings IP gets developed, this new company, Fellowship Entertainment, is going to get all the licensing money for that. Indeed, Fellowship Entertainment, as weird as that sounds, also owns the rights to Tomb Raider, which is having a new live action series being developed, I believe, over at Prime Video. So Fellowship Entertainment's going to get that money as well. But that's where the money is now. And the video game development branch of Embracer now gets probably put on an ice floe and sent off into the ocean to die. Video game development is just not where it is anymore, and that's unfortunate, but at least Embracer has seen the writing on the wall and moved all their value into this separate company, Fellowship Entertainment. But as David has pointed out, Sony is moving in a different direction here. They're moving to out-of-the-home entertainment. Specifically, they're investing $100 million in Cosm. Cosm is a kind of theater where where you can watch sporting events like you're in the stadium, like you're practically on the field. If you've seen pictures of this, it looks very much like you're in the Sphere in Las Vegas. It's pretty stunning. It looks like you're at a football game. It looks like you're at a World Cup soccer game. It's really impressive, but it's also really expensive. And getting the kind of startup money you need to build out one of these Cosm theaters can't be easy. So it makes sense for Sony to come in with $100 million to invest in Cosm so they can expand. I believe they only have like 3 venues in the United States. So for Cosm to expand, they're going to need more of these partners. And this kind of out-of-home entertainment makes sense for a company like Sony that only a couple of years ago actually bought themselves a movie theater chain. Sony owns Alamo Drafthouse, but ever since they bought it, it's not entirely clear they knew what they were going to do with it. There was a lot of talk about maybe Sony was going to be able to leverage their remaining streaming service, Crunchyroll, and the anime that they have on Crunchyroll and use that content to screen it in Alamo Drafthouse, but that doesn't seem to really justify the investment they made in Alamo Drafthouse. I'm not sure Sony themselves knew what they were going to do with Alamo Drafthouse, but now we have a scenario where we can have Alamo Drafthouse theaters with a giant Cosm screen, which is, I think, the kind of appeal that we were suggesting when we've had these conversations about how people don't want to go to movies anymore. The movies is a poor experience. The seating is terrible. The food is terrible. The wait time is terrible. You have to sit through all these trailers. So instead, Sony is making for a much more experiential visit to a theater. In this case, they're doing it with Cosm, but there's also the fact that IMAX has put itself up for sale. It sounds like if you're looking for a premium out-of-home experience, there's going to be opportunities there, and there's companies that are both buying and selling. Right now, I think what all these corporations are looking at are having these kinds of premium experiences out of the home, which is definitely what we've been saying for some time since after the pandemic, that if you want to bring somebody out of the house and convince them not to sit at home watching their streaming, you have to make it worthwhile for them. And I think Sony is trying to make that happen, at least with Cosm.
Yeah, Raul, I think you've touched on a lot of what's fascinating here. For starters, when they bought Alamo Drafthouse, they probably never envisioned this sort of collaboration or possibly a future merger at some point. But it does make sense because nobody really knows what Cosm is. If you could brand that with Alamo, that suddenly becomes a more viable business where you're not having to explain everything. And also, you can do the marketing where you run ads saying, hey, look, Alamo's even better than ever. We're also seeing IMAX up for sale. So you start looking at these pieces and you start wondering, is everyone pivoting now? Is everyone looking at the current state of the marketplace, the one we discuss every week, and going, wait a minute, this isn't great for our business model? And are they thinking about a kind of major realignment, a redefinition, if you were? And the side part of this that does make me nervous is it seems like a lot of people are at least floating the idea of selling. You don't see as many people going, boy, I'd sure like to buy. And that makes me wonder about 6 months, 1 year, 5-year forecasts if the water is starting to be at some people's noses, which we all have been worried about really ever since the tariffs started. So here we are, and it's not getting better, and it's interesting. And so what the industry is doing to fight back is they're having their little petty squabbles, and they're also getting their very small victories. As a matter of fact, Raul, there was like a small piracy victory this week, wasn't there?
Yeah, we see these from time to time where the U.S. Department of Justice, oftentimes in collaboration with other international police agencies, shut down these piracy rings. In this case, the Department of Justice announced that they had shut down a piracy ring responsible for 400 separate websites where you could illegally stream sports, chiefly the World Cup. And of course, this is a headline this week simply because the World Cup is happening right now. And so it made a lot of sense for the Department of Justice to drop a press release this week announcing that they had shut down a piracy ring responsible for the illegal streaming of these World Cup games.
When you say it was a pretty big deal, it's the volume that gets my attention.
Yes, indeed. 400 websites sounds like a lot, and there is a concern about like, oh, wow, well, you shut down 400 websites. There's going to be another 400 websites tomorrow.
We've always described this as whack-a-mole, and the idea is, the Hydra concept. You cut off one head, two heads arise, and so there's no way to get ahead. But in the AI era, isn't even that much harder to bring people to justice? I mean, you flick one button and you've got as many copies as you want of the same piracy site, right?
Right. It's not about the sites themselves. It's about the technology that's being used to pirate the streams in the first place. Usually when these shutdowns happen, they happen hand in hand with arrests. And so the people who are responsible for this have probably been taken out of commission. And the engines, the technology, the hardware that was being used to tap into those streams and then deliver them to these websites are probably shut down as well. So yeah, you can probably start 400 new websites with the press of a button in a minute, but those websites might not have anything to show if the streaming devices behind the scenes or the streaming platforms behind the scenes have been shut down. And I suspect because these things don't happen every day, there's a lot of methodical work that goes into this. And I very much believe that they've shut down the actual technology that was delivering those streams. And so it's going to be hard for this piracy to resume just overnight.
This speaks to another issue we're discussing, though, is we talk about how companies are realigning and they're reconsidering their future. Piracy is winning. And it seems like if you start extrapolating the future, it gets that much harder to police this stuff and prevent this stuff because it becomes more and more immediate. Now, the overwhelming majority of people don't pirate stuff and would never even consider it. But as the economy struggles and lurches, well, it becomes a more viable thing, which means there comes a point where you need to stop raising prices on things. And IMAX may have realized that. I suspect it plays at least some factor in the consideration of selling the company right now, because in our area, IMAX tickets already cost about $30 to $35 a person. How much are you going to pay for a movie that you know is going to be on digital in 6 weeks? That's where we're at.
So Gabe Newell, who started Steam, once famously said that piracy is almost always a service problem, not a pricing problem. If you can make the streams available easily and conveniently to people, they will pay for those streams. I think what we're seeing here is that if we can make these, in this case, these World Cup games, but like any sport, more easily available to consumers, it's going to work. What we've been railing against for some time now on the podcast is when the sporting leagues make it hard to find the games you want. How many places do you have to go to watch a Major League Baseball game, for instance?
I feel triggered.
There you go. If you make it hard, people will just pirate it. That's what Gabe Newell said. If you make it easy, people will give you money. So let's learn from this.
Okay, Tim, let's talk about the box office because last week was good and this week, well, not as much.
Yeah.
But
So first we need to talk about Toy Story 5, which did come in with just under 160 million for the weekend, which was on the lower end of where it was after Friday. We only had the one day, and it could have gone in either direction. Pixar movies, for whatever reason, especially the Toy Story franchise, generally don't follow the same pattern that movies targeted at kids and families do, but this is still great. It will be actually getting very close to 500 million worldwide by the time you hear this. So really, there's no bad news there at all. I just wanted to put a cap on that one because that was important where that one ended up.
My goodness.
Yes, that is a juggernaut, and they need to get on Toy Story 6 right away. Poor Tom Hanks and Tim Allen will be doing the voices of Woody and Buzz until they die.
But not Chris Evans. We've learned that lesson. It's called Lightyear, folks. You've already forgotten it. You're going to have to look it up.
It's already a deep cut. That's how bad that one performed. This week, however, so we have Supergirl, and it was second on Friday with 7.8 million.
Hold on. You said second, not first?
Second place. Nope, Toy Story was still ahead. That had 12.5 million just on Thursday, so that's already at... yeah. DC movies are just cursed, aren't they?
They let Zack Snyder define who they were, and What can I say here that won't get me in trouble? Let's just say that a lot of the people who are theoretically DC fans, in air quotes, are very happy to see a woman fail as the lead in a DC movie. Yeah. What's the budget on Supergirl, Tim? This makes me very nervous.
Oh no, this costs 170, 180 million dollars. Oh no.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness.
Maybe it'll be good. Oh no, 57% positive at Rotten Tomatoes. Oh gosh.
This is the Mandalorian and Grogu pricing without Baby Yoda toy cells. Oh, no.
Oh no, that's that sounds awful. Wow. Oh man, yeah, this is not going to be good. Jackass Best and Last probably doesn't mean anything, but 1.2 million on Thursday. Anything that movie makes is obviously just pure profit, but I assume they're going out with a bang because they're all just way too old for this at this point. Obsession, by the way, just keeps chugging along. It's still for some reason pulling in millions even on weekdays. 224 million. I mean, come on. Backrooms is just about out of steam, but that's at 180 million domestic. The fact that that even got that high is still astounding, especially Obsession. Scary Movie shockingly crossed 100 million domestic. I did not see that coming. That's actually quite good.
I have a wilder stat about that. Scary Movie as a franchise has crossed 1 billion, Tim.
My gosh. That's amazing. I would never have guessed that. So Toy Story is good. We will never talk about Supergirl again, but yeah, at least there's Toy Story. We have Moana in a couple weeks too, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm looking at this a different way than you. I mean, obviously there's going to be a Toy Story 6. None of us is naive enough to think otherwise, but I think what we're witnessing with Disney is the new playbook where you want to occasionally do sequels like this, but you want to space them and you want to put thought into them. Because if you look at it from the right perspective, Inside Out 2 to Zootopia 2 to Toy Story 5 with a Lilo and Stitch remake thrown in and a Moana remake right around the corner, people seem to be more tolerant of that as long as there's an idea. And I cannot emphasize enough the importance of as long as there's an idea, because Inside Out 2 seemed perfectly timed because we were all collectively nervous and uncomfortable as a society. It was a great time to actually be a bit introspective. Zootopia 2, there had been just enough distance from the original where, you know, more cute little animals just really seemed timed perfectly. I don't think the Moana live action is a good idea. I'm on record as saying that they missed their window there, especially after Moana 2 did as well as it did. But I know it's going to open probably, 85 million, something like that. It's going to do great.
Yes.
But they can't do that one too often. I feel a lot better about, say, Lilo and Stitch 2 than I do about Moana, because I feel like they've had 20 years to finally come up with a sequel idea for Lilo and Stitch. That's going to work.
Yeah, we talked about that with Toy Story. Toy Story 4 felt like, well, it's been almost a decade. Let's just make another Toy Story.
Toy Story now with Keanu Reeves was basically the concept.
Yeah, and amusingly, the box office for those is nearly identical. I mean, they both made $1 billion worldwide. Just that for inflation, 3 did way better than 4 then, because that was 10 years of inflation. Toy Story 5, they had a fantastic idea, and that is, I think, very clear from this box office performance so far.
All right, Tim, let's talk about the ratings. There's something to talk about.
There's some things. Yeah. We have the Nielsen streaming ratings for Monday, May 25th to Sunday, May 31st, 2026. And your top original show, and by far the top thing on the ratings this week, is The Burrows. For its full week of 8 episodes, 1.7 billion minutes. That is absolutely fantastic. And I completely expect this to be renewed for a second season. And I'm getting a note here. No, actually, this was already canceled, as we discussed last week.
We're actually in interesting territory here. Like, we don't have the opportunity to actually do this search right now, but that might be one of the largest 5 numbers ever for a canceled show.
For a canceled show, yeah. So one of the best performances for a show that they said, no, has already received the axe. So
if Amazon had a show that had 2.7 billion minutes watched in consecutive weeks, that show would already be renewed for 6 seasons, and I am not joking. Like, this is the Netflix equivalent of it's a damn shame when folks be throwing away a perfectly good white boy like that. Who throws away a 1.7 billion minute viewed show? Seriously. What did the dumpers do to them?
They made someone at Netflix absolutely furious, and they don't care. The algorithm is spitting out all sorts of like, yes, redo this show, green light. And someone said, no, F those guys.
I prefer to think it's actually the opposite, that the algorithm is in its feelings. I made you famous, and this is how you treat me.
There's a considerable amount to unpack here. We could have speculated last week that, oh, this was a 1 week number and that it's going to collapse in the second week. It did not collapse in the second week. And let's bear in mind, of course, that after Stranger Things, yes, this is a Duffer Brothers production, but they are not the writers of the show. They are not the creators of the show. They are the producers of the show. It comes out of their production house, which is what's moving over to Paramount. And so maybe logistically, it just didn't work. Maybe this show was just too expensive with what is frankly a spectacular top-notch cast, and the numbers just do not add up for a second season. We're going to speculate for years as to why it is that a show that came out this strong did not get renewed, but we're probably never really going to know the truth.
Yeah, so just seeing this explode in its second week and then realizing it was canceled by the time we got the first week's ratings is just highly, highly amusing.
I choose to believe that the algorithm is listening to sad, sappy ballads on a loop right now about heartbreak. That's what I'm believing.
Don't humanize the algorithm. All right, let's move on. We actually have some newer things and interesting things still. New in second, Spider Noir. 8 episodes from Prime Video, 851 million minutes after premiering on May 27th. So excellent start.
Excellent start for that show, but a miserable reflection on the Nielsen's. I mean, we are 900 million.
We nearly dropped like almost a billion minutes. Yeah. I'd expect Spider Noir had very solid word of mouth. I would expect this to grow. And again, we have 2 shows following Prime Video's model where season 1 is all at once. And if we get a second one, I bet it's week to week. So I'm curious to see what happens there with this show and another show slightly further down the list. Dutton Ranch is third. That premiered a couple weeks ago, adding episodes week by week on Paramount Plus, 782 million minutes for its 4 episodes. So showing a little bit of growth week to week. But again, I think the point is it's a lot of minutes viewed for not a lot of content at this point. And these Paramount Plus shows, especially the telestrated ones, are just astounding me with how successful they've been. Returning in fourth is The Four Seasons, 759 million minutes, 16 episodes.
So that is 759 million minutes watched on Netflix for the 4 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that our viewers are going to wish we'd shut up and move on, but the Burrows had almost exactly 1 billion minutes more. The 4 seasons has been renewed for next
Renewed for a third season, by the way. Yes, this was the second season arriving on May 28th. So yes, and it has already been given a renewal for a third season. The Boys is fifth after completing its series with last week's ratings, 40 episodes, 735 million minutes. So sliding down the list over the next couple weeks. Another Prime Video show, so 3 actually on the original chart this week, Off Campus, that has been here for a couple weeks now, 708 million minutes. This one is actually showing a fair amount of resiliency, at least for something that came all at once a couple weeks ago. So I had to double check. Like, yeah, of course, it's Amazon putting the whole season out on May 13th. It was renewed for a second season well before it premiered. And I would expect those to be weekly. But yeah, this is actually showing quite a bit of staying power. It was the top show last week. This week it's 7th. Nemesis down to 635 million minutes for its 8-episode season. So quick plummet for that one. Not sure if it was meant to be multiple seasons, but no renewal for that one yet from Netflix. Your Friends and Neighbors from Apple TV Plus is up to 8th, 387 million minutes for 18 episodes. One more to go in its second season. June 5th will be the final episode, so that would reflect on next week's ratings. So it's managed to hang on. Worst Ex Ever from Netflix, 386 million minutes in 9th. And new in 10th, The Testaments from Hulu, 377 million minutes for 10 episodes. Yep, this was its finale, by the way. 3 episodes premiered on April 8th, and then it was weekly with the final episode arriving on May 27th. So it took the whole season for us to see it on the ratings. This is, of course, the spin-off follow-up to The Handmaid's Tale, which was never, Roll and I were discussing, was never a big juggernaut, at least when we were doing the ratings. Its earlier seasons, of course, predate the podcast by a couple years, but it was always a very reliable show and ostensibly Hulu's flagship show at one point for a couple years. But the follow-up did not capture the same audience that one did. But it has gotten a second season, so we may see it again at some point. So again, 377 million minutes, good enough for a second season on Hulu. All right, Originals was interesting. Movies, not so much. It is led by The Crash, 564 million minutes. So already off to a not great start because that was the top movie last week. Second is GOAT, 519 million minutes. And in third, Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan Ghost War, 424 million minutes. So the top 3 were exactly the same, just a lot lower. In fourth is a movie called Cleaner, So doing some research, because unfortunately Nielsen did not provide us a date with this one, there were actually two possibilities for this movie. One was a 2007 movie directed by Rennie Harlan starring Samuel L. Jackson. The other was a 2025 movie starring Daisy Ridley. It's actually the first one. It's the 2007 movie. When it showed up on Netflix, I don't have that information, but it placed at 420 million minutes. Why, people? Why?
Yeah, this is one of the weirdest flexes from Netflix ever. Of all the obscure movies for them to promote and drive to.
Oh, a new Samuel L. Jackson movie? I guess I'll watch that.
There has to be something here, some combination of keywords that had led this movie to not the top of the charts, mind you.
Right.
But somewhere in the middle of the rather bleak movie chart that is.
What were you watching that it then told you should watch this and it auto played and therefore counted on the ratings? I don't know.
Yeah, I had no idea this movie existed until we had this conversation.
I saw it in 2007, and I was sad for Robert Forster, who was only like ninth billing on it, and it still depressed me that he was in it.
I knew David would remember it. I didn't go back and see if I wrote anything about it for Box Office Profits. I almost assuredly did, but I had no recollection of it till it showed up on these ratings, and we did some research, and yeah, it was that movie. Really?
I am pretty sure that this is one of Keke Palmer's first roles. Her first one was probably Akilah and the Bee, but I feel like this was the second or third movie she was ever in, and it also had Maggie Lawson, who we love from Psych. And the funny thing is, the people I remember from this are not the stars of the film.
Right.
Who were, like Ed Harris and Eva Mendes, but those are not the ones that I would like look at it and go, ooh.
Most
God, 17% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was despised.
So yeah, that is your Netflixing for this week. Most of the rest of this list we've seen before. Ladies First premiered last week, 388 million minutes. Remarkably Bright Creatures, 261 million minutes. Swapped, 260 million minutes in seventh. Those three on Netflix. Sonic the Hedgehog 2, for some reason, credited to Netflix and Paramount Plus, which that makes sense. 257 million minutes in eighth. Stolen Baby, blah, 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 183 million minutes. Hulu, Netflix, that has been here far too long. But at least we have something new in 10th. Gabby's Dollhouse, the movie, 179 million minutes from Netflix. So a terrible number, but again, a new movie. This was, yes, a theatrical release back in September 2025, but on May 22nd, it arrived on Netflix. Oh, hey, guess what? It was a Universal release. I'm curious then, hey, maybe it was on Peacock that whole time, and that's why it took so long for it to arrive on Netflix. But yeah, that was a terrible movies chart. Oh boy, okay. Acquired is 10 shows we have seen before, led by Bluey, 923 million minutes. It is most notable for the return of Euphoria in fourth, 730 million minutes for its 24 episodes. This was, of course, the week of its third season finale. That episode dropped on May 31st, so it's probably more reflected in these ratings than what it would be next week, but the season completing was enough for people to go hate watch it apparently and bring it back to the chart. La Brea is still here, 608 million minutes in seventh, and Marshall's, its 13 episode season on Paramount Plus and Pluto TV, 522 million minutes, which was enough for 10th place. At least the originals was interesting, but the rest of this list was mostly ridiculous. But hey, there's the Burrows, almost 2 billion minutes, but still canceled.
And we're going to be talking about this for a few weeks.
We are going to do this for a while. Yes, exactly.
All right. Thank you, Tim. As always, we close it out with what's been keeping us busy over the last week. And it's David Lynch summer here for me. After having finished Twin Peaks season 1 and 2 and Fire Walk with Me, I also have now watched Twin Peaks The Return. And I would say I watched it fairly quickly. I've been under the weather, as you might be able to hear. So I've not felt like doing much of anything except just watching television. And I really enjoyed Twin Peaks The Return. I liked what they did with the season. I found it really interesting, and I'm looking forward to reading some of David Lynch's commentary and some of his autobiography and things like that, where he'll talk a little bit more about what he did. But I also know that David Lynch, in his view, he's never going to tell you what he intended to do with the show. He wants you to interpret it your way. And I always have kind of liked that about him. But I thought it was definitely an interesting deconstruction of binge watching television and how viewers react. And they definitely didn't do what probably viewers wanted them to do. And that's okay. It's their story and they get to tell it. I found myself sad at times because so many of the cast members who were in the show have passed away in the last 9 years since that aired, including David David Lynch himself. I know that Raul was kind of saying that last week with the Burrows, but yeah, I did. I found myself feeling sad about, some of the people that we've lost from among that cast. There were a lot of interesting and talented people. So yeah, I will be continuing my David Lynch summer as we go. So I'm sure I'll talk about some of his other work in the coming weeks.
Well, Kim, I'm glad you had a chance to watch Twin Peaks: The Return because, I might need some help understanding some of the things I watched. But really, honestly, I just have one question. What? We'll take this offline.
Raul, what's been keeping you busy?
I touched on this last week, but I wanted to close out the fact that I have completed now my binge of The Burrows. Yes, it's Burrows week on Streaming Into the Void. It was very good. I enjoyed the whole thing. I appreciate what they were doing. They were leaning into the Southwestern mythology of the skinwalkers. They're not coy about the monster. Heck, the monster appears very clearly in the first episode before they roll the title credits. They're not beating around the bush here. The acting is fantastic. Yes, Alfred Molina carries the series. There is some clunky writing in some places. For instance, Alfred Molina's character, who is a senior citizen in a senior living facility, who is very conscious of the fact that if he starts babbling about monsters and things that monsters are doing to people, he's going to appear, senile, and that they're going to lock him up. And then he does exactly that. And he babbles about monsters. And of course, people think he's senile and he gets locked up. No, he is a very intelligent man that knows better than to do something like that. And he shouldn't have done that. And yet that is exactly what he does. And then there's some confusion from the writer's room clearly as to just what is it that these monsters can do and what can't they do? Because sometimes they can do one thing and then sometimes they can do another thing. Well, yeah, maybe get your story straight, guys, before you actually go to screen with that. But ultimately, it was a very satisfying series, and the fear I had for the end of the series, a series that got canceled after one season, that it would end on some kind of like undecided or unclear cliffhanger did not materialize. If you want 8 episodes of a very good supernatural thriller drama that leaves you very satisfied with the conclusion, I strongly recommend you watch The Burrows. It was a lot of fun. Yes, at the end, there's always the mystery of like, oh, was there more? Could there something else be happening right now that we don't know about? But also knowing Netflix and knowing the streamers and knowing that if this got renewed, it would probably get renewed for way too many seasons and they would drag it out and it wouldn't be as satisfying. I think one season of The Burrows was perfectly fine. I enjoyed it. I suggest you watch it.
Okay, Tim, what's been keeping you busy?
So when I saw Project Hail Mary in theaters and got the cavalcade of trailers, there was one that immediately had me excited. I know I mentioned it to you guys, but I'm not sure it ever made it onto the podcast. And that was the trailer for The Sheep Detectives. I was like, oh, this looks so great. I need to see it. Well, now it is on streaming, and I am happy to report that since it's now on Prime, it is an absolute delight. It is a fun mystery, so many funny moments, and some great voice work by the actors playing the sheep. I'm generally bad at identifying voices, but I was like, is that Brett Goldstein? And yes, it is. And he's hysterical. At one point, you can almost tell him he's like channeling Roy Kent for a voice. But there's also Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Bryan Cranston, Patrick Stewart, Regina Hall, Bella Ramsey. They're all great. And the human actors are fun, of course. Hugh Jackman is at the center of the mystery because he's the shepherd of the sheep and is found dead. And the mystery involves trying to figure out who did it. It's a fun little mystery. It's very, very funny. And you should watch this movie. It's now on Prime. I was very happy that it matched my expectations after seeing the fun trailer.
Fantastic. We'll look forward to watching that.
Yay.
David, what's been keeping you busy?
Yeah, so Kim, I think you know. I'll say it like this. One of my favorite all-time singles is something called Show Me Love by Robin. Anybody familiar with it? R-O-B-Y-N? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so when we were in Belgium many years ago, she was just playing a club there. I had no idea who it was. I had seen Robin in concert. And so it was amusing to me that she's always been like flirting on the outskirts of awareness in the United States. And in recent years, an entirely new generation of fans has discovered her. And I'm mentioning all this before I talk about a film, because what's been keeping me busy is a romantic comedy named Voice Voicemails for Isabel on Netflix, which Raul had actually found the trailer and he was like, David, oh my God, they're direct dialing you. And he was so right. So right. This is a Hallmark movie with a budget. That's the only way you should look at it.
Yep, we talked about it once too. That's a fantastic trailer.
And as part of that budget, they basically bought every song they possibly could by Robin. In fact, another song of hers that I'm less familiar with is basically the moral compass of the film. I'm not joking. And at one point, as they pivot from the second to third act, they play the entirety of Show Me Love. And I think you can tell by the happiness in my voice as I describe it how much they had me hooked by this point. The movie is exactly what the trailer says it's going to be. There's no subtlety to it whatsoever. And honestly, there are some characters that I wish they'd gotten another dimension so that I could say they were one-dimensional. I don't want to oversell that. Like Nick Offerman, you're holding out hope. Maybe there's more to it than this. No, that's all they give him in the film. So they are a little selfish in how they play things out. But it is such a great idea for a story. It really is. And there's just a little bit of You've Got Mel in the concept or The Shop Around the Corner. It's got that kind of vibe and a really good cast. As an example, the star athlete from Running Point, his name is Toby Sandeman, is in this. And that was the moment I realized, oh my God, he's actually very, very British because he uses his actual accent in it. And it turns out that he's also a world-class athlete who's won like gold medals in events. So I kept learning. But my favorite thing about this is an actress who I really, really dig. She's only in this about 5 minutes, but her name is Leah McKendrick. And whenever I see her in stuff, every time I go, wow, who's that? That person is really good. And it happened again here. So I just wanted to mention that. She plays part of a couple with Harry Shum Jr., who's somebody else I like, and the guy who's still waiting for that Crazy Rich Asians sequel because he was promised stardom he's never going to get. Yeah, seriously. He shows up for the last 10 seconds of Crazy Rich Asians, and he would have been like the romantic lead in the second film. So he got really ripped off by the fact it never happened. But anyway, the point is, Voicemails for Isabel is an absolute delight. And when you just want to be happy for a couple hours, I highly recommend it.
Two things. Was the other song Dancing on My Own?
It was, yes.
Which is, well, okay, despite not being a hit, it is basically one of the biggest anthems of like the century. And also, Leah McKendrick was the writer and director.
Of Voicemails for Isabel?
Yes.
Wow, she's a superstar. My goodness. All right. Well, that's good to know. I wish that she would write slightly more multidimensional characters for tertiary characters, but she definitely saved the best stuff for herself, and I love her. It's a good film. It really is. It's warm and just inviting. That's what I'd say.
Okay, thank you, David. And thank you for listening to Streaming Into the Void. Please consider subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts, and we welcome your feedback. Remember that we're on social media at Streaming Void and online at streamingvoid.com. If you like what you're hearing, please consider becoming a supporter on Patreon at patreon.com/streamingvoid. Be sure to watch for us again next week.